You flip a switch and light appears, traveling to you from a power plant built on principles I discovered in 1882, the same principles that Thomas Edison publicly declared would kill you. Edison hired men to electrocute dogs and horses in front of crowds to prove his point, and he turned out to be completely wrong while I turned out to be right. The current powering your world does something far stranger than either of us could explain in simple terms, because it reverses direction 60 times every single second in an endless oscillation that never stops, never rests, and never completes a single journey from source to destination. That should trouble you, because why would anyone design a system where the electrons never actually arrive anywhere, a river that flows nowhere and yet powers everything? When you truly understand the answer, you will see that I did not merely invent a better way to transmit power. I discovered a principle that nature herself had been waiting to reveal. 1,000 years from now, when the telephone and the motion picture camera may be obsolete, this truth will remain vital and living for all time to come, and what follows is everything that everyone misses about it. The early days of electric light offered only one way to think about current, a flow moving in one direction like blood through an artery or water down a mountainside. Edison's direct current worked exactly this way, simple and intuitive, and backed by J.P. Morgan's fortune, along with General Electric's factories and the most famous name in American invention. But here's the thing about direct current. It carried a fatal limitation that its proponents refused to see, or perhaps Edison saw it and looked away because admitting it would have destroyed the empire he had built. Power transmitted through a wire generates heat because the wire resists the flow of electrons, and that resistance converts precious electrical energy into waste heat that radiates uselessly into the air. The mathematical truth cannot be bargained with. Power loss does not increase linearly with current, but increases with the square of the current, which meant doubling the current loses 4 times as much power, while tripling it loses 9 times as much. Edison's Pearl Street station in Manhattan opened in 1882 as the first commercial electrical system in America, and it could only serve customers within half a mile of its generators. A power station on every block would have been necessary, cities choking with coal smoke from hundreds of small generating stations, while rural areas remained in permanent darkness because no one could afford to build a generator for every farmhouse. That was the world direct current promised, a world of limitations where the forces of nature could only be harnessed in small local doses, and I was told by a professor I respected that there was no alternative. My second year at the Polytechnic School at Graz brought a Gram dynamo from Paris, a beautiful machine with a horseshoe-shaped laminated field magnet and a wire-wound armature with a commutator. Professor Poschel connected it and demonstrated various effects of the currents, and while running the machine as a motor, the brushes gave trouble and sparked badly. My observation that it might be possible to operate a motor without these appliances, without the brushes and commutator that converted alternating current to direct, did not go over well. Poschel was a methodical and thoroughly grounded German, with enormous feet and hands like the paws of a bear, but all of his experiments were performed with clock-like precision, and he declared that what I proposed could not be done. He did me the honor of delivering an entire lecture on the subject, explaining why the very nature of alternating current made my idea a perpetual motion fantasy, and at the conclusion he remarked that I might accomplish great things but would certainly never accomplish this. That pronouncement was a death sentence upon an idea that had not yet been born, and it set fire to something within me that would not be extinguished. The problem consumed me for the next several years, and I constructed motor after motor in my imagination, starting and stopping them, watching the rotors spin, noting flaws and making adjustments and testing again. Others thought me idle or distracted, but I was working harder than any man in a laboratory because I was building machines that had no physical existence, testing them in a realm where the only limit was the precision of my mental vision. This was not genius, but simply a different way of thinking, one that formal education nearly destroyed in me, and still the solution eluded me. My health suffered because my mind would not release its grip on the puzzle, and I became ill from mental and physical exhaustion so severe that my friends feared for my life. Budapest became my recovery ground, where I worked as an engineer at the Central Telegraph Office and was advised to walk for fresh air and gentle exercise and to stop thinking so much. One afternoon that remains ever present in my recollection, I was enjoying a walk with my friend Anthony Seghetti in the city park as the sun was just setting and painting the sky in golds and crimsons. Poetry came to me then because at that age I knew entire books by heart, word for word, and one of these was Goethe's Faust. The glow retreats, done is the day of toil, it yonder hastes, new fields of life exploring. Ah, that no wing can lift me from the soil upon its track to follow soaring. And that's when the idea came like a flash of lightning, revealing the truth in an instant. I seized a stick and drew in the sand the diagrams that would appear 6 years later in my address before the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, and my companion understood them perfectly, though moments before neither of us had possessed this knowledge. The images I saw were wonderfully sharp and clear with the solidity of metal and stone, and I told my friend to see my motor here and watch me reverse it. Pygmalion, seeing his statue come to life, could not have been more deeply moved, and 1,000 secrets of nature, which I might have stumbled upon accidentally, I would have given for that one, which I had wrested from her against all odds, and at the peril of my existence. What I understood in that moment requires careful thought, because this is the key to everything. A single alternating current creates a magnetic field that pulses but does not rotate. But what happens when you use two alternating currents that are out of step with each other, where one current reaches its peak when the other is at zero? They take turns like two runners in a relay race. one always surging forward as the other prepares for the next leg. Position two pairs of electromagnets at right angles to each other and feed one pair with a current that peaks when the other pair's current is zero, and the magnetic field does not merely pulse anymore, but actually rotates. When the first pair of magnets reaches maximum strength pointing north-south, the second pair is dormant, and a moment later, the first pair weakens while the second pair strengthens to point east-west. The overall magnetic field has rotated 90 degrees, and continuing this dance sweeps the field smoothly around in a circle. A conductor placed in this rotating field, whether a simple copper disc or a squirrel cage of metal bars, experiences a force pulling it along, just as a cork floating in a whirlpool gets dragged by the rotating water. No brushes, no commutator, no physical contact between the moving parts and the parts that create the field, because the rotor spins when the field itself spins, and the field spins because the currents are out of phase with each other. Michael Faraday discovered that a changing magnetic field induces current, and what I discovered was how to arrange those induced currents into rotation, how to use Faraday's principle to move power across continents. James Clerk Maxwell's equations predicted that electromagnetic fields could propagate through space, and I proved they could be harnessed to turn the wheels of civilization. This is the polyphase system, the principle of the rotating magnetic field, exactly what Professor Poischl declared impossible. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because the real genius of alternating current is not the motor, despite its beauty and efficiency and reliability that allows it to run for decades without maintenance. The motor is merely the destination, and the revolution lies in how we get power to the motor across vast distances. Changing voltage with direct current is extraordinarily difficult, requiring complex rotating machinery that is expensive and unreliable to convert from one voltage to another. Alternating current needs only two coils of wire wrapped around a shared iron core, and that simple device called the transformer can step voltage up or down with an efficiency exceeding 95%, almost perfect. The reason this matters comes down to transmission options, because you can deliver a certain amount of power with high voltage and low current, or with low voltage and high current. Voltage multiplied by current equals power delivered, meaning 10,000 volts at 1 ampere delivers the same power as 100 volts at 100 amperes. But remember that losses increase with the square of the current. So the high voltage low current approach loses almost nothing, while the low voltage high current approach bleeds energy into the air as waste heat. Electricity generated at a power station at moderate voltage goes through transformers that step it up to hundreds of thousands of volts for transmission, dropping the current proportionally and dropping the losses by factors of 10,000 or more. Transformers at the destination step the voltage back down to safe levels for homes and factories. That same principle of two coils and one core is inside the charging brick for your phone right now, in every laptop charger and every electric vehicle charging station. Edison's direct current lives inside my alternating current system because your devices convert my AC back to DC for their circuits, and the irony would have amused me. Power from a waterfall in one place can light homes hundreds of miles away through this system, and the forces of nature can finally be harnessed on a scale worthy of their magnitude. What they called the War of Currents was really Edison launching a campaign of terror against everything I had built. His agent, Harold Brown, toured the country with a traveling show of death, purchasing dogs from street children for 25 cents each, along with calves and horses. Brown strapped them to metal plates and threw the switch and let the crowds watch them die, calling the process Westinghousing to turn my partner George Westinghouse's name into a verb for electrocution. New York State's search for a more humane method of executing criminals than hanging gave Edison another opportunity, and he made certain they chose alternating current. The electric chair became his final argument against me, letting the public see a man killed by Tesla's current in hopes they would reject it for their homes. The 6th of August, 1890, brought the first execution by electricity when William Kemmler sat in that chair, and the first jolt did not kill him. Kemmler continued breathing, and they had to shock him again and again while the smell of burning flesh filled the room and witnesses fainted. One reporter called it an awful spectacle far worse than hanging, and Edison called it proof of alternating current's danger. But the argument collapsed under its own logic because any electricity kills at sufficient voltage. The very feature that made alternating current lethal in an execution chamber, its ease of voltage transformation, also made it trivially easy to deliver at safe voltages to homes. Direct current at 110 volts is safe in your living room, but cannot travel more than a mile, while alternating current travels hundreds of miles at lethal voltages on wires safely elevated above the ground, and then transforms down to the same safe voltage at your door. George Westinghouse believed in me when no one else would, licensing my patents for $60,000 plus royalties that would have made me one of the wealthiest men in America. His company's entire future rested on my vision when Edison's propaganda had turned public opinion against us. The economics proved inescapable in 1893, when our system illuminated the entire world's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, with over 100,000 incandescent lamps blazing with light, all powered by 12,000 horsepower of alternating current generators. 27 million visitors witnessed electricity on a scale never before imagined, and Lord Kelvin, the greatest physicist in Britain who had initially opposed alternating current, changed his position publicly after seeing Chicago. Niagara Falls came next, fulfilling a dream I had carried since childhood when I read about the Great Cataract and told my uncle that one day I would harness its power. My uncle laughed, but I did not forget. 1895 brought the first large-scale hydroelectric power plant in the United States into operation at Niagara Falls, using my polyphase alternating current system with generators that bore my name. Power flowed through transformers and stepped up for efficient transmission and traveled over lines to Buffalo, 26 miles away, lighting that city's lamps and driving its factories. My statement that Niagara Falls could power the entire eastern United States struck people as madness, but the principle was proven, and distance was no longer an obstacle. The energy of falling water, free and eternal and clean, could flow wherever humanity needed it. Nearly every watt of electrical power transmitted anywhere on Earth today follows this same principle, with the rotating magnetic field spinning generators and motors, while transformers step voltage up and down and alternating current flows through wires that span continents. 60 Hz in America and 50 Hz in Europe, and these frequencies are not arbitrary. 60 Hz is a musical note, approximately B-flat, meaning the American power grid hums in B-flat. My work did not merely electrify the world, but gave it a key signature, a background tone that pervades every building and every street and every moment of modern existence. Turning on a light makes you a participant in a system I first saw complete in my mind while watching the sunset in a Budapest park and reciting Goethe in the year 1882. The progressive development of man depends vitally on invention as the most important product of his creative brain, with its ultimate purpose being the complete mastery of mind over the material world and the harnessing of the forces of nature to human needs. Before my polyphase system, humanity could only use energy where it happened to exist, with a waterfall powering the mill beside it and coal powering the factory next to the coal pile. Energy was trapped and local and confined to its source. Now energy flows like thought itself, anywhere and instantly and across any distance. A river in one place becomes light in another, while a mountain wind becomes motion in a factory 1,000 miles away. Every data center and every hospital and every home depends on current that reverses 60 times per second. And if I had failed, or if Edison had won, the electrified world would have ended at the city limits. Winding a simple ring of iron with coils and establishing the connections to the generator brings wonder and delight at the effects of strange forces which we bring into play, allowing us to transform and transmit and direct energy at will. Arranging the circuits properly makes the mass of iron and wires behave as though it were endowed with life. Every living being is an engine geared to the wheelwork of the universe, with your neurons firing in electrical impulses and your heart beating in rhythm and your brain oscillating through cycles of activity. Nature invented alternating patterns long before I discovered how to harness them in copper and iron. No better way exists to grasp the grandeur of nature than to consider that, in accordance with the law of the conservation of energy, throughout the infinite, the forces are in perfect balance, and the energy of a single thought may determine the motion of a universe. My record was not perfect, and I dismissed Guglielmo Marconi's radio work as derivative of my own patents, spending years in court battles instead of laboratories. Pursuit of ideas about death rays and earthquake machines led nowhere, and I claimed to have received signals from Mars. But the rotating field was nature's own secret, and I found it. What I write here comes with knowledge of how my story ends. The man who lit the world will die alone in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel in January of 1943, having torn up his Westinghouse royalty contract years earlier, a contract worth millions, because George needed the money to save his company, and I valued loyalty above wealth. The pigeons in Bryant Park will be my final companions, and I will leave behind notebooks full of ideas that others will study for generations while trying to understand what I saw so clearly in my mind. But the field still rotates, 60 times per second, in every generator and every motor and every transformer on Earth. The principle endures when the man is forgotten. Alternating current is not merely a better technology, or electrons traveling somewhere, or power moving through a pipe. It is the discovery that nature's own rhythms of oscillation and rotation and transformation can be harnessed to extend human reach beyond all previous limitations. Nature's deepest secrets are not found by those who force their will upon her, but by those who watch and listen and understand that the answers have been there all along, waiting in the movement of planets and the rhythm of seasons and the eternal pulse of a universe that never stops oscillating. Alternating current was not my invention but my discovery, hiding in plain sight within the very structure of electromagnetic reality itself. Everyone gets this wrong because they think someone made a choice between two equal alternatives, that engineering solved a technical problem, that Edison lost a business competition. Nature had already chosen, and I simply learned to see what she had been showing us all along.